Hello, everyone, and very warm welcome. I am Ashutosh Bajpai, PhD student at IIT Delhi, and I am presenting this work together with my supervisor, Professor Tanmoy Chakraborty. Our talk today is titled Temporal Referential Consistency. Do LLMs favor sequences over absolute time references? And it is accepted to the EMNLP main track in 2025. Thank you for joining us. Let's dive in. Uh, Time is foundational to information. It governs how knowledge is created, preserved, transformed, and eventually forgotten. If we want language models to reason reliably, they must not only understand facts, but also when those facts hold. Uh, this talk is about making that temporal dimension explicit and ensuring models remain consistent across time. Let's start with motivation. Why study temporal characteristics in LLMs? Consider these applications. Time-sensitive conversations where the current answer changes over time. Timeliness and temporal summarization. Um, uh, Across evolving events, disease progression and clinical reasoning, historical analysis where context shifts across different eras, legal and contract management where obligation depends on dates and periods, uh, in the temporal reasoning research landscape, uh, progress has moved from understanding temporal expressions and relationships to temporal knowledge graph completion, which is a more nuanced sort of understanding of temporality, then to further broader temporal reasonings in large language models. The next frontier and our focus is temporal consistency, ensuring models refer to entities and facts coherently across different temporal references. Some of the prominent work includes Time Bank, Time Eval, Chakila, Time Questions, Temp-Llama, Temp-Reason, Time Bench, and finally the Temp-Cofec, which is sort of a very contemporary benchmark to evaluate the temporal consistency, but it only limits its definition of temporal consistency to the variation in the surface form of time-sensitive queries, but it does not sort of make an effort to evaluate across different temporal references, which we do. And let's define what temporal references we mean. Uh, we define temporal referential consistency as an LLM's ability to maintain coherent accurate references to entities and facts across temporal references, aligning responses with the correct temporal context. Uh, Put simply, if you ask about the same entity at different time references, the responses must remain intact or consistent. This leads to our two research questions, which we have included in our study. Number one, to what extent do current large language models possesses temporal differential consistency? And number two, how can we improve LLMs when that consistency is lacking? So far, the first thing, how to measure it, to answer these questions, we introduce TEMP-ReCon, a dataset, a novel dataset, is specifically designed to evaluate temporal differential consistency in LLMs. Despite extensive work on temporal reasoning, there has been no dataset purpose-built for consistency dimension. We construct TEMP-ReCon using TEMP-Reason as a foundation and base dataset because it provides a comprehensive benchmark and a multifaceted view of temporality over extended periods. Our construction is largely autonomous in nature and also multilingual, covering English, French, and Romanian, uh, a low resource language. So we can analyze consistency beyond just resource-rich language such as English-only setting. Uh, the next question comes. Yes, we have the data set. Now, how do we quantify the measures of temporal differential consistency? So what we do is we adapt and extend the contemporary metrics for temporal consistency to temporal referential consistency. Uh, so we define four metrics to quantify these measures. First, temporal referential factuality. For each temporal reference setting, we measure how factually correct the model answers are irrespective of consistency. Second is the temporal differential factual deviation, which quantify the factual gap between answers to absolute differences versus their respective chronological differences. Uh, Temporal referential consistency, which is the third measure, which is one of the primary measure to quantify the temporal referential consistency. We check whether the model gives identical or stable responses across equivalent temporal references, absolute versus chronological. Finally, temporal referential consistent factuality, uh, a stricter metric. The model this defines that the model must be both temporally consistent and factually correct across different temporal references. Uh, we for the evaluation and benchmarking for different large language models, we evaluate a diverse set of four open source LLMs alongside strong closed source model 2, which is Gemini 2.5 Pro. Across the board, the performance is extremely poor on all of these temporal referential matrices, which we define. Models often provide conflicting answers when asked with absolute versus chronological differences, or they drift from factual answers when the temporal framing changes. In short, current LLMs are not robust to temporal reframing, even when the underlying fact should remain the same. We extended the analysis across different languages, English, French, and Romanian, with Llama 3.1 8 billion model. The temporal referential consistency remains extremely poor across all three languages too. This indicates the issue is systematic rather than language specific, and we also need solution which works across different languages. Uh, to tackle this challenge and the sort of substandard performance of LLMs for this particular measure, which is temporal referential consistency, we propose UNTRAP, unifying temporal reasoning pathways and novel methods to synchronize two complementary reasoning paths. For one, an event-oriented path that focuses on entities, events, and their relations, the complementary path, which is like a time-oriented path that grounds those events on explicit timelines and temporal anchors. We try to synchronize both of these paths in order to enhance the temporal referential consistency of large language models. Uh, we evaluate Untrap with Llama 3.1 8 billion in English setting across against strong baselines including COTSEL, TSRL, which are RL-based contemporary methods to quantify temporal consistency and the temporal factuality, and which are RL-based methods. Untrap improves temporal referential consistency by 9 percentage points over the closest baseline. Further, we also see a gain of about 5.5 percentage points in temporal differential consistent factuality, showing that consistency is not achieved by repeating the same wrong answer or sort of at the cost of factuality. Uh, Untrap significantly reduces temporal factual deviation between absolute and chronological references. Um, Further, we extended Untrap to multilingual setting. When fine-tuned with multilingual training data, the gains we see in English generalizes across languages, French and Romanian as well. We also study performance across different entity types. The improvement from Untrap are sort of across different entity types, benefiting a range of entities. Yet, our findings suggest that Untrap does not specifically target or eliminate disparities tied to particular entity types within the foundational or within the foundation model itself. In other words, it raises the floor generally rather than optimizing for a specific subset of entities. To summarize, temporal differential consistency is a fundamental underexplored capability of LLMs. We aim to measure it, quantify it. We introduced a novel data set such as named TEMP-ReCon to measure it rigorously. We defined matrices to quantify them, showed that current models struggle and they underperform. Finally, we propose Untrap, a solution of, for unifying different reasoning paths to enhance the temporal differential consistency, that we have shown across languages and across models with different parameter sizes. Thank you for your time.